Have you ever been in a room full of people, everyone's laughing and talking over each other, and there's one person just sitting there, watching, calm, not really saying much, and someone eventually walks up to them and goes, "Why are you so quiet?" And that person does the little smile, maybe a small shrug, and then they go right back to doing what they were doing before. Here's the thing most people get wrong about that moment. They think the quiet person is uncomfortable, nervous, maybe a little broken. Like they just need the right push and they'll finally open up and become someone more talkative. That assumption is extremely common, and it's almost completely wrong. Let's start with the brain, because this is where it gets genuinely interesting. Back in the 1980s and 90s, a Harvard psychologist named Jerome Kagan was studying babies. Specifically, he was looking at how differently babies respond to new things. Some babies, when you introduce something unfamiliar, a new face, a new sound, a new environment, they just kind of look at it. Fine, no big deal. But other babies? Their whole system activates. They cry harder. They kick. They get overwhelmed. Kagan called this group high reactive. Now here's what makes this important. He followed those same children for years, into childhood, into teenage years, into adulthood. And what he found was that a significant number of those high reactive babies grew up to become quieter, more inward people. Not because something went wrong. Not because they had a bad experience, but because their nervous systems were literally built to take in more information than average. Their brains were processing the world at a higher sensitivity level than most people around them. So think about what that actually means in a social setting. You walk into a party. To most people, it's just a party. Music, noise, conversation. But to a high reactive person, that same room is almost amplified. The energy of people, the noise, the conversations happening in layers, the unspoken tension between two people across the room, they're picking all of that up simultaneously. They're not being antisocial. They're just running more programs at the same time than everyone else. And because of that, here's what happens inside a quiet person's head during a normal conversation. Someone says something. The quiet person immediately processes it. They think of 3 or 4 possible responses. They consider which one is most accurate, most useful, most honest. They start mentally drafting something. Then the moment shifts. Someone else jumps in. The conversation moves forward. And the quiet person is sitting there holding this perfectly formed thought with nowhere to put it. Sometimes it's genuinely funny. Like they had the perfect joke, timed exactly right in their head. But by the time it was ready, the conversation already moved 2 topics over. So they just keep it. Maybe text it to one person later at midnight. That person thinks they're the most hilarious human being alive, but no one at the party will ever know. There's actually a kind of loneliness to this, being funny or insightful or emotionally intelligent in a way that almost nobody gets to see. Now let's talk about what happens to quiet people over time, because this part matters. From a very young age, quiet people start receiving a very specific message from the world around them. Teachers write it in report cards. Needs to participate more. Parents get worried in that careful, low-key way that still communicates something is wrong with you. Relatives at family gatherings treat the quietness like a puzzle they need to solve. If they just ask the right question in the right tone with enough enthusiasm, maybe finally this person will crack open. Multiply that by years, by dozens of interactions. What that does quietly is teach the person that their natural way of being is a problem. That the inside, all that processing, all that depth, all that careful thinking is somehow less valuable than what gets performed out loud. And so quiet people don't just become quiet. They also become private. And those are 2 very different things. Quiet is just about volume, how much you talk. Private is something deeper. It's what happens after enough people treated your inner world like a curiosity instead of taking it seriously. It's a protective layer that nobody consciously decided to build. It just formed slowly, the way your skin toughens in places that keep getting rubbed. Here's the part that I think almost nobody talks about, and honestly should bother all of us a little. Quiet people are often the most genuinely attentive people in any room. Not the kind of listening where you're just nodding while building your next sentence. Actual listening. The kind where they remember the thing you said 20 minutes ago, and they notice when what you just said contradicts it. The kind where they catch the small shift in your voice when you're glossing over something that clearly matters. The kind where they noticed you looked uncomfortable when someone brought up that one topic, and they filed it away, and they never brought it up again around that group because they understood. This is the person most likely to be described as distant by people who don't know them well, which is genuinely one of the more ironic things about how quiet people get perceived. Think about meetings at work. Someone is presenting something that could easily have been a 2-sentence email. The quiet person figured that out within the first minute. They've already identified the actual decision that needs to be made. They're watching everyone else talk around the real issue in real time, and they probably won't say anything because the room isn't really asking. The room is just performing. The quiet person sees all of this. They just don't need to announce it. Now here's something worth really paying attention to. When a quiet person actually decides to speak, when something crosses that internal line from, "I'll keep this to myself," to "this genuinely needs to be said," what they say tends to land differently. Not always, but often enough that the people around them notice, even if they can't explain why. The reason is simple. Those words have been thought through, sat with, turned over. By the time they leave the quiet person's mouth, they already know exactly what they mean. There's no filler. No, I'm just thinking out loud here. They've already thought out loud. Just internally. What you get is the conclusion. That kind of precision is rare, and we've somehow built a world that doesn't reward it much. Getting close to a quiet person, genuinely close, takes a specific kind of patience, because in the early stages of any relationship, they're watching, not in a suspicious way. They're tracking the gap between what you appear to be and what you actually are. They're noticing small things, building something internally. And they're weighing whether what they carry inside is something you'd actually handle with care or just treat like an interesting story to tell someone else later. Some people never get all the way in, and quiet people know this. They can usually count the people who truly know them on one hand, and they hold on to those people with something that looks like loyalty from the outside. But from the inside, it feels more like relief, like, finally, someone who gets it. There's also something important about how quiet people handle their own emotional experiences. Feelings don't get processed out loud for them. They don't vent easily. They don't call someone and emotionally download everything that happened today. Instead, things settle internally, slowly, like sediment sinking to the bottom of water, which means the people in their lives often genuinely have no idea what's going on inside them. And not because the quiet person is hiding it on purpose. It's more that the interior experience is complex, and translating it into words that do it justice is hard, and at some point they stopped trying to force it because it never quite came out right anyway. So they carry things quietly, the way they carry most things. And I want to be clear about something. None of this is shyness. Shyness is about anxiety, fear of judgment, wanting to speak but feeling held back by fear. That can absolutely coexist with being a quiet person, but it's not the same thing. A quiet person might feel completely comfortable in a room and still choose not to talk much. Because for them, words carry real weight. Saying something thoughtless or just saying something to fill air feels genuinely strange. Almost wrong. The social pressure to talk just to make other people comfortable with silence? It seems bizarre to a quiet person. Why would you say something just to say it? That question sounds completely reasonable to one type of person and completely alien to another. And what that tells us is something worth sitting with. There are fundamentally two different ways of moving through social reality. And somewhere along the way, one of them got labeled normal and the other got labeled as something to fix. The loud one set the standard. The quiet one has been gently failing it ever since. Quiet people are not waiting to change. They are not a project. They are not almost extroverts who just need a little more encouragement. Most of them are doing something constantly that looks from the outside like nothing, carrying whole conversations in their heads, processing experiences with a level of detail that casual small talk simply cannot hold, noticing everything, saying very little, and meaning every word of it. So the next time you're with someone who isn't saying much, don't rush to fix it. Don't make it a thing. Just let the silence be what it is. Stay in it for a moment. They'll notice that you did. They always do.